0 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. Recording started. 0 meters per second. 95% battery. One meters altitude. 2 meters distance. 1 meters per second. 94% battery. Two meters altitude. 2 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 93% battery. Twenty-three meters altitude. 17 meters distance. 8 meters per second. 92% battery. Twenty-four meters altitude. 54 meters distance. 8 meters per second. 91% battery. Twenty-six meters altitude. 19 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 90% battery. Forty-nine meters altitude. 19 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 89% battery. Sixty-one meters altitude. 22 meters distance. 7 meters per second. 87% battery. Sixty meters altitude. 128 meters distance. 7 meters per second. 86% battery. Sixty-two meters altitude. 120 meters distance. 8 meters per second. 85% battery. Sixty-one meters altitude. 134 meters distance. 4 meters per second. 85% battery. Sixty-one meters altitude. 99 meters distance. 8 meters per second. 83% battery. Sixty-one meters altitude. 129 meters distance. 7 meters per second. 82% battery. Sixty-two meters altitude. 62 meters distance. 8 meters per second. 81% battery. Sixty-two meters altitude. 40 meters distance. 7 meters per second. 80% battery. Sixty-one meters altitude. 140 meters distance. 8 meters per second. 79% battery. Sixty-two meters altitude. 126 meters distance. 7 meters per second. 78% battery. Sixty-one meters altitude. 33 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 77% battery. Thirty-five meters altitude. 23 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 76% battery. 11 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 75% battery. 1 meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 74% battery. 1 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 1 meters per second. 73% battery. 0 meters altitude. 2 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 72% battery. 4 meters altitude. 1 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 71% battery. 18 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 70% battery. 48 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 69% battery. 'Warning. Disconnected.' "38 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 67% battery. 11 meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 1 meters per second. 65% battery. 0 meters altitude. 1 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 64% battery. Recording stopped. "0 meters altitude. 2 meters distance. Recording started. 1 meters per second. 64% battery. 2 meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 63% battery. 0 meters altitude. 5 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 62% battery. 1 meters altitude. 5 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 61% battery. 0 meters altitude. 5 meters distance. 1 meters per second. 60% battery. 0 meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 1 meters per second. 59% battery. 1 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 57% battery. 0 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. Recording stopped. 56% battery. 0 meters altitude. 11 meters distance. Recording started. 1 meters per second. 56% battery. One meters altitude. 1 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 55% battery. Five meters altitude. 1 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 54% battery. "27 meters altitude. 28 meters distance. 7 meters per second. 53% battery. "42 meters altitude. 47 meters distance. 8 meters per second. 52% battery. "43 meters altitude. 54 meters distance. 7 meters per second. 51% battery. "42 meters altitude. 62 meters distance. 6 meters per second. 49% battery. "32 meters altitude. 10 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 48% battery. "12 meters altitude. 1 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 47% battery. "2 meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 1 meters per second. 46% battery. "0 meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 1 meters per second. 45% battery. "1 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 44% battery. "1 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 43% battery. "0 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 42% battery. "1 meters altitude. 7 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 41% battery. "1 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 40% battery. "1 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 39% battery. "1 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 38% battery. "1 meters altitude. 7 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 37% battery. "1 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 36% battery. 0 meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 1 meters per second. 35% battery. Two meters altitude. 2 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 34% battery. Six meters altitude. 0 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 33% battery. Six meters altitude. 1 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 31% battery. Fifteen meters altitude. 25 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 30% battery. Fifteen meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 2 meters per second. 29% battery. Three meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 28% battery. One meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 27% battery. One meters altitude. 6 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 26% battery. Warning, aircraft battery at 25%. 1 meters altitude. 5 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 25% battery. One meters altitude. 5 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 24% battery. Warning, aircraft battery at 23%. 1 meters altitude. 5 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 23% battery. One meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 22% battery. Warning, aircraft battery at 21%. 1 meters altitude. 4 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 21% battery. Zero meters altitude. 5 meters distance. 0 meters per second. 19% battery. Recording stopped. Warning, aircraft battery at 19%. Warning, aircraft battery at 19%. Warning, disconnected.